the Foundations for Elite Health webinar series that we're running throughout the month. And we've already had some fantastic calls already this week from Kim and from Ginny, also about the microbiome, because it's the microbiome week this week. We're going to wait until 6:10 just to make sure we've got lots of people tuning into the call, and they're not going to miss all the information. But just want to say it's lovely to see some friendly faces on the call so far. We've got Marjorie there, and Liz James, nice to have you with us this evening, Liz, and Fiona. Thank you for joining, Fiona. It's nice to have some moral support from my group there. We've got Rachel Tate. Hi, Rachel. Robert. Simon Peck, thank you for joining, Simon. Hope you're well. We've got Victoria. And we've also got Rachel Dobson. And I know Rachel's able to speak to us this evening. Are you there, Rachel?
Hi, Sarah. Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hi. Thank you for joining us, Rachel. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Very good.
You've had a good day?
Yeah, busy day at work, but looking forward to this webinar.
Oh, good. So I know that Rachel, you've had some experience using the probiotic skincare range called Trulume, and I think you've got a little bit of a testimonial that you're very kindly going to share with us this evening.
I have, yeah. I've been using Trulume for about 6 months now. Just loving it. I mean, a real difference in my skin. But I used it in a different way the other day. I take the background. I have an autoimmune disorder called Sjogren's, very similar to lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, which means I have to be very careful with my skin in sunshine or cold. It's a change of humidity. So after our lovely weekend, having kept myself in the shade, I came home to find a kind of rash over my chest and my neck. It's quite a specific rash. It's an autoimmune rash, quite unsightly, but that doesn't bother me. It's the intense itching to the point actually you just want to scratch your skin off. It's just unbearable. I have.
It sounds awful.
It is. it is.
Yeah.
I don't get it all the time. Just normally beginning of seasons it tends to happen. So I have got a prescription cream that I put on when that happens, a steroid. Is
that like a hydrocortisone cream or something different?
I can't remember the name, but very similar to that. Which normally works within a few days.
Okay.
I thought I would be brave because I heard how great the intrinsic complex serum was. So instead of using my prescribed cream, I thought I'd try our products, which I love and have every faith in.
Yes, why not?
But I was really surprised. It was taking a gamble because I had to go out to work, and I have to say I was quite distressed.
Yeah.
So I put it on in the morning, drove to work, and I suppose within an hour the itching started decreasing. By the time I got back to the next venue I was going to, 2 hours later, I have to say the itching had 80% gone.
Gosh.
Which was unbelievable because it was just me stir crazy. When I got back from work later, because I'd taken a photo beforehand, as you do, and I took a photo after, and the difference was quite big. It was less inflamed visually, but for me to be itching that quickly was amazing.
Yeah, and now you'll have the confidence to be using that if that was ever to happen again, which is of course, you know, part of the issue, particularly if it's so visible, isn't it, on your neck and everything. You always feel a bit self-conscious about these things.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I've had I can sympathise actually, Rachel, because I have eczema on my hands, and I'm very. Oh, I should say I had, and that's part of my story tonight. But I know how unsightly it is, and how it's sort of so distracting, isn't it, when your skin is in a sort of flaring up situation.
Yes, yeah, and it brings it down so quickly. I was amazed by the products once again.
Yeah, because they're just totally unique, aren't they? I think, you know, I haven't come across anything remotely similar on the marketplace. So it's great to have something like this to be able to recommend to other people who might have similar problems.
Definitely. And I applied it again in the evening because it was still itching a little bit, and by the following morning the itching had completely gone. And normally it takes 3 days to die down.
Goodness.
No, impressive.
So you'll be sharing your story about that then, and sort of helping lots of other people, hopefully.
Well, definitely an emergency kit. In your medical kit.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I'm really appreciative of you coming on the call this evening, Rachel, and thank you for sharing that story, because I'm sure it will help lots of people and give them confidence to try something themselves if they have any similar issues.
My pleasure, Sarah.
Thank you, and I hope you're going to enjoy the information that I'm going to talk about today, because that might be shed some light on why that's happening.
Yeah, really looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And we've had some more people join the webinar. We've got Claire Johnson. Hi Claire, nice to see you, or have you joined us this evening? We've got lots of Jackies, Jenny Davis, Jenny Hook, Jeremy Townsend. We've got Marlene. Hi Marlene, haven't seen you for a while. Angie Watson, very, very nice to have you with us. It's great, so many people are managing to tune in on this lovely evening, dragging themselves away from the garden, which is always very impressive. And I know we've got Sue Thomas on the line. You'll know Sue Thomas, she's already given a couple of the really, really good webinars in this series. And I think you're going to talk to us about a problem with teenagers.
Yeah, well, I could talk to you a lot about problems with teenagers, Sarah. It doesn't just have to be spots.
Yes. More specifically, Sue.
Yes. I have 2 teenagers in particular who are both, at the moment, quite self-aware. One of them a 13-year-old girl, one of them a 16-year-old boy, both of whom are at that stage where how they look is quite important to them.
Yeah.
And first off, my daughter Frankie started using the intrinsic complex on some dry skin that she had on her eyelids, because she's also an absolute makeup fanatic and was using not particularly good quality makeup that was drying the skin on her eyelids out. And we used intrinsic complex on the eyelids initially, which cleared it up within about 3 or 4 days, just really nicely. The eyelids returned back to normal. But my son in particular had got some very angry spots on his back, teenage spots on his back, that I took a photograph of, put some intrinsic factor on before he went to bed, and when he got up the next morning they were visibly reduced. The angriness in them and the spot itself had kind of not quite disappeared, but it was very definitely less angry. But the one thing that he then decided he was going to do was start using the intrinsic complex on his face, on some of the spots on his face, and this was just last week. And he came in after school, put it someone in the morning when he went in, he came in after school, and these were his words: "Oh my goodness, Mum, that cream is insane. Look at my spots." And they were, again, visibly reduced in terms of angriness, visibility on his skin. And for him, is an absolute convert now, and it's costing me a fortune because he's using it all the time.
That's the downside.
It is. But I think, you know, for me, it's not. I would rather he was putting a good, clean probiotic skincare on his spots rather than using these horrible chemical cleansers that just sort of scrape away at the microbiome on his skin and the quality of his skin. So you know, it means that I'm funding a habit of his, but it's a good habit. Bad one for a teenager.
You know, so many teenagers, you know, are using antibiotics continually, aren't they?
Exactly. Yeah. Because they'll go to the doctors because they've got really bad acne. The doctor doesn't know what to do, so prescribes antibiotics, long-term antibiotics that then just create their own problem in themselves. So it unfortunately is an inevitability with teenagers these days because of the fact that their body is over is struggling with kind of processing increased amounts of toxins in our environment,
Yeah.
that is coming out in their skin. So acne is becoming a big problem. And as I say, all the doctors do is prescribe antibiotics. Well, if we've got something that they can apply to skin that will reduce the visibility of them, to give them more confidence, I think, because at this age, at 15, 16, they're
So important, isn't it?
yes, it is really
For their
important.
self-esteem as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think the intrinsic is a bit of a sort of wonder cream, isn't it? It seems to work for all sorts of issues.
It really does. It really does, for burns and spots and all sorts of skin conditions, just in terms of repairing and reducing this sort of swelling and inflammation.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Sue, for coming on and helping me out and talking about that this evening. I'm sure a lot of people found that really useful. And I know I've got some friends with some teenage children. I'm going to recommend that to them as well. So thank you all for joining me this evening. And I would like today to continue the great work that's already been going on this week from Kim Bradley and Ginny Burgess, already talking about the microbiome. They've really focused very much on the microbiome on the gut, in the gut, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about other places that you have the microbiome. And I'm just trying to move my slides on a little bit. Here we go. And you'll see that tomorrow we've also got Sue Sharp completing this series of talks. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later on the webinar. Here we go. So here we are. The microbiome is everywhere in and on your bodies, and that might be a bit surprising, but actually it's a really good thing to be having, to have all the great microbes, bacteria, fungi, viruses in a good balance in and on our bodies. And so we know that we've got the microbiome in the gut, don't we? But we've also got a really diverse population on the skin. We've got microbiome in your ears, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, and in your mouth, and even on your scalp. And we're really starting to discover how beneficial all the viruses and bacteria and all the things that make up the microbiome in all the different parts of the body are so essential for our health. Today I'm really going to focus on the skin microbiome, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about the microbiome in the ear, just as an example of what antibiotics can do, and as an example to show where medicine is really going, and how we really need to have a rethink about how we treat infection and bacteria in the body and so on. So the interesting thing about the microbiome on the skin, that's even more diverse than that in the gut. So it has there's so many different varieties of microscopic organisms on the skin, and obviously it varies from person to person, but also it differs from body part to body part, and particularly because the different parts of the skin are rather different. You know, some of the skin is more oily, some of the skin is drier, some of the skin tends to get daylight on it and some doesn't. And all those sort of things affect the population of the microbiome in different areas of the skin. Of course, what we need is a skin which is nice and healthy, it's not inflamed, it's sort of intact, and it provides a really great barrier between us and the outside world. Keeps all the nutrients and moisture inside, and it stops the toxins entering into the body, hopefully, from the outside. And unfortunately, we know that what tends to happen is that our modern 20th century living has depleted the diversity of the microbiome throughout the body, but I'm really going to reference the skin as well today. And we know that people who have skin disorders, things like eczema, psoriasis, they have, when they're having an attack, the microbiome in that area is very compromised. In other words, it's reduced in variety, so it tends to just narrow down. And it's interesting, isn't it, that doctors use wherever a skin inflammation or a problem is, they tend to diagnose this because it's in a certain place on the body. So for instance, people with eczema tend to get it on the inside of the elbow, whereas if you've got psoriasis, you tend to get it on the outside of the elbow. And of course, there'll be quite different makeup of your microbiome on those two different areas. So there's a real tie-in there, which sort of makes sense. And in fact, they've done some research on South American tribes who have sort of been untouched by the modern world, and they've taken swabs from their forearm, compared it with someone from actually from Italy, just a sort of westernized, some of their westernized lifestyle, and they've discovered that the tribe that's sort of completely unused to anything like antibiotics and chemicals and so on, they have a really diverse range of in their microbiome, far more diversity than we have. So that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Our 21st century living is really attacking the microbiome and not in a good way. The other interesting thing to note that we have a different microbiome depending on our different life stages. So when we're born, depending on how we're born, whether it's sort of naturally or via cesarean, we'll have a different sort of seeding of our microbiome. Then, of course, depending on whether we're breastfed or not, that will help affect the microbiome. How close we're brought up with nature, you know, are we connected to the environment? Are we growing up on a farm with animals and mud and getting sort of outside and getting dirty, or are we in a city where everything's much more sterile and we're perhaps not getting that variety of microbes to come into contact with us? Just out of interest, there's a particular ancient strain of bacteria called Archaea. I'm not sure whether I'm pronouncing that correctly, but they've discovered recently that that's very prevalent in children and in also adults over 60. And not really sure why that happens, but they think it's to do with the communication between the microbiome on the skin and the immune system. And so that's an important thing that happens, that the microbiome has this ability on the skin to communicate with and tell the body how to react to when it needs to make an immune response to an invader. And of course, unfortunately, the answer to the question at the bottom is, are we too clean? Is definitely, you know, we wash every 5 minutes, we use antibacterial hand washes. We are exposed to things like radiation, chemical and environmental toxins, and we're so removed from this natural world and nature. For instance, interestingly, gardeners have a particularly good microbiome, and it just it seems very obvious, doesn't it, why that would be. So we know that skin issues like eczema, psoriasis, acne and rosacea, they're all on the rise at the moment. And, you know, our chemical and toxin exposure is very high, much higher than it's ever been. In fact, it's estimated that the average woman puts on about 515, to be precise, chemicals on her body a day, just from a beauty routine. You know, that's getting up, washing your hair, washing your face, having a shower, drying your hair, putting products on your hair, makeup, perfumes, all those sorts of things. Really, when you think about it, and there's such a build-up there of chemical toxicity that our body is just not used to. And we know that the more chemicals that our skin microbiome is in contact with, the more reduced and ineffective it becomes at keeping our skin healthy, keeping us healthy. In fact, I was talking to one of my clients today. I forgot to mention, actually, I'm a Pilates teacher, but I also am very interested in helping my clients holistically. And I was telling them I was doing this webinar today, and one of my clients said that her elderly father had never washed with soap in his life, and when they were caring for him, as he got quite quite elderly, they wouldn't allow him to wash his body with soap, but only water. And when he was taken into hospital, the nursing staff couldn't believe how fantastic his skin was. And of course, he'd probably gone most of his life without any chemicals being put on the skin. That's very different from the experience of most people today. And of course, antibiotics are a real issue, aren't they? We all know about this. We all know that antibiotics tend to, well, they kill off good and bad bacteria, which just really gives space for the very virulent and often pathogenic bacteria to take over, which causes infection and so on. In fact, we need to change the way we think about the infection in the body, and particularly on the skin, well, actually anywhere in the body, because instead of killing off all the bacteria, what we really need to do is expose the body to more good bacteria. And then I wanted to just to sort of slightly break off from the skin, to a little bit of an aside, because I think you'll remember this interesting story. And it sort of illustrates really the problem with prescribing antibiotics and why they don't work. So there's a consultant in America called Dr. Andrew Goldberg, and he's actually what we would call an ENT, an ear, nose and throat specialist in California. And he had a patient with an inner ear infection that he was treating. And unfortunately, having thrown everything at this patient, you know, different courses of antibiotics, specific drops for his ears, and then they tried washing his sinuses out with vinegar, all sorts of things, didn't seem to do the trick in any sort of meaningful long-term way. So Dr. Goldberg realized that this patient was coming back, and he was in sort of a bit of trepidation because he thought he was really run out of ideas of how to help this patient. Anyway, patient comes into the treatment room and told the doctor that he's actually shouldn't be there because he'd cured himself. And of course, Dr. Goldberg was a bit skeptical about this, but very pleased that he seemed to have got rid of this inner ear infection at long last. So he said, well, what did you do? What do you think you did that helped cure your ear infection? And the patient replied that he'd taken some earwax out of his good ear and he transplanted it into his infected ear, and that seemed to have done the trick. Now, bear in mind, this is quite a while ago, and Dr. Andrew Goldberg readily admits that he thought his patient was a bit balmy and a bit crazy, and because there was nothing to tell him that this would work. That is until 5 years later, when he was doing his own research into the microbiome, and he suddenly realized that if he had paid more attention to his patient, they must probably have discovered the importance of the microbiome earlier on. So it's a very nice little story just to remind you that perhaps a different approach is needed when we're thinking about disease and inflammation in the body. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about my own experience and my own example of this, because I've suffered from eczema all my life, on and off, sort of a classic thing. It would come and go and come and go. And in adulthood, it's really been focused on my hands and on my palms of my hands, but mainly on my fingers initially. And of course, I used the usual things like hydrocortisone cream. I was talking to Rachel about this earlier. And it would go for a while and then come back again. And of course, now we understand that it's all about having a balanced microbiome versus an unbalanced microbiome. And obviously what I had was a very unbalanced microbiome on the skin of my hands in particular, which made it really vulnerable. And you can see how red and raw it is and scaly the skin is. And, you know, that's just leaving the skin open to pathogenic bacteria, viruses, and so on. And of course, before long, you've got a bacterial infection in there as well. As well as putting hydrocortisone cream and barrier creams on, you're then using antibacterial creams. So luckily, having learned a lot of the information I'm talking to you about tonight, these are the steps I took, and you can see the before and after pictures of my hand. And luckily, my hand is still how it is pictured on the left there at the moment, and it's really changed my life. It's very, very debilitating to have skin like that on your hands. I couldn't put my hands in washing up liquid or anything like that. Probably that's a good thing, but I couldn't even wear rubber gloves because that would irritate the skin. So what did I do? I reset my gut bacteria first of all, because that's always the best place to start, an essential place to start. Using the Synergy's reset program that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but I also reduced the chemical exposure on my skin. So I switched to totally probiotic friendly skincare, and those 3 steps really transform the skin, and it means now I can wear rings without my fingers swelling up, and bracelets, and woolen jumpers don't irritate around my wrists and things like that, and it's really made such a huge difference. So here we are. These are the products that I use. Obviously, it's not just about products, it's about having a really healthy diet. Instinctively, don't we know that to have clear skin, we need to eat well. And we need to, as people have explained so far this week, we need that really healthy microbiome in the gut as well. That's definitely the place to start. But I want to talk a little bit about the Trulume range of probiotic skincare that Synergy has recently developed. It's a sort of natural extension from the work they've done on all the research at the Hughes Centre on the microbiome. And they've sort of then taken that one step on to look at a formulation that will help the microbiome in the skin. And it sits really well alongside the microbiome program. It's a sort of gives us a 2-pronged approach to healing and resetting our microbiome internally and externally. Formulated really with lots of ingredients like botanical ingredients designed to work through all layers of the skin, and without any of those irritants that would cause a problem that we mentioned earlier. No oils or waxes or petroleum byproducts or alcohol, things like that. Only ingredients that are going to work right through the 3 levels of the skin to help the skin to sort of heal itself and do the jobs it should do, like encouraging the production of collagen and elastin, reducing age spots and plumping up the skin. And it really is a very unique range. As far as I know, I only know one other company who've got anything remotely similar to this. So it's definitely not been produced with all that scientific background and all that great knowledge that Synergy have at their disposal. So it's a world away. This approach from skin to skincare is a world away from the chemical peels and harsh exfoliants and exfoliators and things like that that we've used before. And I'm going to just give you a quote, really, just to illustrate how this is going to be the skincare of the future. People are already now starting to realize that this is the way forward. And in fact, the former president of Lancôme, the big beauty house I'm sure you've all heard of, actually said bacteria, yeast and enzymes are to beauty what electricity is to modern day cars, for example, the Tesla. And we had Trini Woodall very recently on Radio 4 Woman's Hour saying that she'd been to an ingredient fair for skincare manufacturers and that it's all going to be about probiotic skincare very shortly. Well, we know that Synergy have not just gone out and picked a couple of products to add to their range. They've formulated this from scratch with that in mind. So it's a bit of a sort of a whistle-stop tour this evening, I'm afraid. I hope you found the information interesting. Tomorrow, you can tune in again at 6 o'clock to listen to the lovely Sue Sharp, who works with her husband, Grant, and who joined Synergy, having helped Grant with, because the Synergy product had helped Grant with his own health. And then they really enjoy the idea of being able to help other people with their health as well. So I hope you will support her and listen to her webinar tomorrow. She's going to talk about waste disposal from the body, so that'll be an interesting subject. We've also got on Sunday evening at 8 o'clock the lovely Kim Bradley, who you will have heard do some excellent webinars already during these 2 weeks. And that's an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the company of Synergy and learn maybe how you could help other people improve their health and lifestyle. You know, maybe you're interested in starting your own business, but you don't have a big lump sum to invest in it, or perhaps you're just looking for something to give you a real purpose in life, and you maybe enjoy helping other people. So if it's job satisfaction you're looking at, you know, give this a whirl and have a listen to Kim on Sunday evening at 8 o'clock. And also, just to mention briefly, because I think my time's about up, we have the Business Accelerator Training Day on Saturday the 9th of June, designed to help you get started with and motivated in your business and to help people with their health, which is something that we all hopefully love doing. So that just leaves me to say thank you very much for bearing with me and my technical issues. If I can do this, anyone can. So, you know, have a think about that, and, you know, maybe you'd like to volunteer to share your knowledge as well next time. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a great evening. Goodbye.